The photo that changed everything the morning had started just like any other. The city was busy, the streets were noisy, and the smell of coffee and baked bread filled the small diner on Fifth Avenue. In the middle of it all was Elena, a young waitress with tired eyes and a heart full of quiet dreams. She moved between tables with practiced grace, carrying trays of steaming pancakes and refilled mugs of coffee without spilling a drop. She smiled when people looked, but behind that smile lived 1,000 worries. Elena worked double shifts, 6 days a week, trying to make enough to pay her rent and take care of her little brother, Rafi. Their mother had passed away 10 years ago, and their father had disappeared soon after. Since then, Elena had become everything's sister, parent, provider, protector. Most people didn't know her story. She didn't talk much about herself. She kept her head down, her heart guarded, and her dreams tucked away in the notebook she kept hidden in her apron. But this morning was different. It started quietly enough. The usual customers came in, the retired couple who always ordered. The same booth, the construction crew who tipped in cash, the college kids trying to sober up. Then, just before 9, a man walked in. He wasn't dressed like the others. He wore a simple gray sweater, jeans, and glasses. He looked ordinary, almost too ordinary. But there was something about him, something calm. Something powerful but gentle. He sat at a corner booth near the window, alone. Elena approached him with her usual greeting, her smile automatic. "Good morning. Can I get you started with some coffee?" The man looked up, his eyes kind and tired. "Yes, thank you," he said softly. As she poured the coffee, Elena noticed his hands, clean with a simple wedding ring. His watch was expensive but not flashy. He carried no laptop, no briefcase. Just a phone and a small black wallet, which he placed on the table beside him. "I'll give you a few minutes with the menu," she said, stepping away. She watched him out of the corner of her eye as she served other tables. He wasn't scrolling through his phone like most people. He just looked outside, sipping his coffee slowly, lost in thought. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't quite place it. About 15 minutes later, the man stood up and walked toward the restroom. As he did, his wallet fell silently to the floor, landing just beneath the booth. Elena saw it, but he didn't. She picked it up quickly and called out, "Sir, you dropped this." He didn't hear her. Curious and planning to hand it back when he returned, Elena opened the wallet to check for a name or ID. The first thing she saw stopped her breath. Inside the wallet, behind the clear plastic slot, was a small worn photo. It was black and white, a little faded at the edges, but clear enough. It was a picture of a woman, young, beautiful, smiling. The woman in the photo was her mother. Elena's hands trembled. She blinked, thinking she was wrong. Maybe it was someone who just looked like her, but no, she knew that face. She had the same photo in an old box at home. It was taken when her mother was just 19, before Elena was born. Before everything went wrong, but how could this stranger have it? Her heart pounded so loudly, she thought it might burst from her chest. Confusion, fear, a flood of memories she had buried for years came rushing back. She clutched the wallet and stared at the photo, unable to move. The man returned a few moments later and smiled politely. "Thank you," he said, reaching for the wallet. But Elena didn't let go. He looked surprised. "Is something wrong?" She finally found her voice. "Where did you get this photo?" His smile faded. He looked down at the wallet, then back at her. Something changed in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, a shadow. "That photo. She said again, her voice shaking. "That's my mother." He stared at her in silence for a long moment. Then he whispered, "What's your name?" "Elena," she said. The man's expression shifted. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. Slowly, he sat back down in the booth and motioned for her to sit across from him. For a second, Elena hesitated. Her hands were shaking, her thoughts racing, but she sat down. He took a deep breath. "My name is Sundar," he said quietly. Her heart skipped. "Sundar? No last name." "Sundar Pichai," he added gently. She froze. She had heard the name before. Of course she had. The world knew it. The CEO of Google, one of the most powerful and respected people in tech. She had read about him, seen his face in articles. But she had never expected him to be sitting in her booth, holding a photo of her mother. Why do you have that picture? She asked again, barely able to breathe. He looked down at the table. Because she saved my life, he said softly. The diner seemed to go quiet. The voices, the clatter of plates, the music all faded into the background. Elena stared at him, not understanding. Your mother, he said, was the reason I didn't give up. And then he began to tell a story from years ago. A time when he was young, lost, and far from home. A time when he had almost quit everything. And how a woman named Anaya Elena's mother, had given him hope. Elena listened, frozen, her eyes wide, her fingers clenched. She didn't know it yet, but the truth was bigger than she could imagine, and what Sundar was about to say next would change everything. Forever. Asterisk a mother's kindness. A future Sabadelina sat across from Sundar, her hands resting tightly on the edge of the table, gripping it as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Outside the diner window, the morning light had grown brighter, but inside, time seemed to slow down. The world shrank to that single booth. 2 people, a photo, and a past neither of them expected to meet again. Sundar's eyes had changed. The calm professionalism that carried him when he first walked in had melted away, replaced by something deeply personal, almost vulnerable. It was as if opening that wallet had also opened a wound. A memory long buried but never forgotten. Elena struggled to breathe evenly. You said ... she saved your life? Sundar nodded slowly, his fingers gently brushing the edge of the photo inside his wallet. Yes, and not in the way most people would expect. She didn't pull me out of a fire or rescue me from a car crash. No, she did something much harder. She made me believe in myself again when I was ready to give up. He looked at Elena, searching her face. Do you know where your mother was in 1996? Elena furrowed her brow. I wasn't born yet. She was living in India then, I think. In Chennai. She didn't talk about that time much. She was working at a clinic, Sundar said. A small one, tucked behind a temple. She wasn't a doctor, but she was training to be a nurse. And she volunteered in her free time, helping people who couldn't afford care. Elena felt the back of her throat tighten. Her mother had always been selfless, always giving even when they had so little. She remembered stories about those days, but they had been fragments, never the full picture. I was a college student then, Sundar continued, just 19. My family didn't have much money. We were struggling, and I had reached a point where I felt invisible. I would go to school and study and work part-time jobs, but it felt like none of it mattered. I started to believe that I was chasing something I'd never catch. He paused, taking a sip of his now cold coffee. One day I got sick, he said. A bad infection. I had no money, and I didn't want to burden my parents. I walked into that small clinic, thinking I could get in and out without attention, just a quick prescription. But your mother, she saw right through me. He smiled gently at the memory. She sat me down and said, You look like someone who hasn't slept in days. When was the last time you ate a full meal? And I broke down. Right there, in front of her. Elena's chest ached. She could picture it so clearly. Her mother, gentle and kind, coaxing truth out of someone with nothing but her voice and her presence. It sounded exactly like something she would do. She gave me medicine, yes, Sundar said. But more than that, she made me talk. She made me promise. I wouldn't give up. That whatever was weighing me down, I would fight through it. She told me that the world didn't need perfect people, it needed kind ones. And that if I stayed kind, no matter how hard things got, I'd be okay. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she blinked them back, gripping the table harder. Before I left, Sundar added, she handed me this photo. She said it was taken just before she left her own village. She wanted me to remember her as someone who believed in people. She said, someday, you'll be sitting across from someone who needs a reminder too. Maybe you'll pass it on. But I never did. I couldn't because the truth is, I needed it more than anyone else. He looked down at the photo in his wallet again, the edges worn, the plastic cover slightly smudged. I've carried it with me ever since, he said. Everywhere I went, from India to America, from college to my first job. Through failure, doubt, and eventually success. That photo reminded me where I started, and who helped me believe I could get there. Elena was silent. Her throat was dry. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She had never known this story. Her mother had never spoken of it, but it made sense. Her mother had always been like that, offering hope to others while hiding her own pain. She gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left for herself. She died when I was 11, Elena whispered. Her voice barely audible. Sundar's expression grew heavy. I'm so sorry, he said. It was cancer, Elena continued. She fought for years. And when the hospital bills piled up, we lost our apartment. My dad. He couldn't handle it. He left. I raised my brother after that. I never knew any of this. I wish she had told me. Sundar looked at her, his voice gentle. Sometimes people give their light away without wanting anything in return. Maybe she believed you didn't need the story. You were already the proof of it. Elena wiped at her eyes, the tears falling freely now. She saved you, she said. And now you're here, with her photo. Sitting in the diner where I work. She paused. Do you believe in fate? Sundar smiled softly. I believe in kindness. And in what it creates, they sat in silence for a long moment. Two strangers no longer strangers. Two lives connected by one woman's act of grace. Ben Sundar's phone buzzed quietly on the table. He glanced at it, but didn't pick it up. Instead, he looked at Elena again. I want to do something, he said. For you. For your brother. For your mother. Elena shook her head instinctively. You don't have to. I know I don't, he said. But I want to. She changed my life. It's time I do the same for someone else. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad. On it, he wrote a number, tore the paper, and slid it across the table. This is my direct line, he said. Not an assistant. Not a gatekeeper. Me. I want to hear from you. Soon. Elena stared at the paper. Why? She asked. Why me? He leaned back, his voice low. Because I think you're stronger than you know. And I think your mother would want me to remind you of that. Just then, a customer at another table called for coffee. The spell of the moment broke slightly, the reality of the diner returning. Elena stood slowly, her body feeling light and heavy all at once. Thank you, she whispered. No, Sundar said. Thank you for bringing her back to me today. He stood and walked toward the exit, leaving behind an untouched plate of food and a heart full of memories. Elena watched him leave, the note still trembling in her fingers. She looked down again at the photo. The same smile, the same kindness in those eyes, but she didn't know that this was only the beginning, because the next time she saw Sundar, he wouldn't be sitting quietly in a booth. He would be standing on a stage, and he'd be saying her name to the world, asterisk a name on the stiga. The afternoon sun poured through the diner's windows as Elena stood in a daze, her fingers still gripping the tiny note Sundar had left behind. The edges were already crumpled, slightly damp from the tears she didn't remember shedding. She kept staring at it over and over as if the numbers might change or disappear like a dream dissolving in. Daylight. Her shift wasn't over, but something inside her had shifted completely. The world around her had continued. Moving plates clinked. Customers talked. The coffee machines hissed, but inside her, everything had gone still. That night, when she walked home, she didn't take her usual shortcut through the alley. She walked slowly down the long route, her thoughts too heavy to rush. Her worn sneakers hit the pavement with soft, dragging steps, the sounds of the city distant and muted. The wind tugged at her ponytail as her brother's voice echoed in her mind. His laughter, his complaints about school, his midnight questions about the stars. Rafi, he was only 13, full of life and impossible questions. He didn't know. About Sundar. Not yet. He didn't know about the photo either. When Elena opened the door to their tiny apartment, she found Rafi asleep on the couch, the TV playing some documentary about robotics. His mouth hung open slightly, a textbook balanced on his stomach. She smiled and gently pulled a blanket over him. She stood there watching him for a moment, her eyes full of both pride and pain. She had tried so hard to protect him from the broken pieces of their past. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let some of the truth come to light. She walked into her bedroom and sat on the edge of her bed. Her old photo box sat beneath it, dusty and untouched for years. She pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside were old birthday cards, faded Polaroids, letters her mother had written but never mailed. And there it was, the same photo Sundar carried. Her mother, 19, smiling in the sunlight, wearing the simple dress with the blue flowers, the same hope in her eyes. Elena placed Sundar's business card beside it. She stared at both for a long time. That night, she didn't sleep, and the next morning. After dropping Rafi at school, she made the call. Sundar picked up on the third ring. Elena, he said immediately, as if he had been waiting for the call. Her voice caught. You remembered my name? How could I forget? He said gently. Are you free tomorrow? The following day, Elena found herself in front of a black car parked outside her apartment. The driver held a sign with her name. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The leather interior was spotless. The driver was quiet and respectful. They didn't talk much, but the journey was smooth, fast, and somehow soothing. Outside the window, the city blurred into green hills and clean glass buildings. After almost an hour, the car stopped in front of a massive structure, modern, elegant, and intimidating. Google headquarters. Elena's heart raced. A woman in a smart blue blazer greeted her at the entrance. Ms. Elena, welcome. Pichai is expecting you. The hallway was long, filled with bright lights and quiet energy. Tech workers passed by with laptops and coffee cups, nodding politely. Elena followed the woman through security, into an elevator, and then into a large glass room on the top floor. The view overlooked the entire city. And there, standing in front of the window with his hands in his pockets, was Sundar. He turned when he heard her footsteps. You came, he said warmly. I almost didn't, she admitted. But you did, he replied, motioning toward a chair, and that means something. They sat across from each other again, but this time there was no tray of coffee, no background chatter, just silence and sunlight. Why am I here? She asked. Sundar leaned forward. Because there's something happening tomorrow. A conference, one of the biggest tech events in the country. I'm giving the keynote speech. Elena nodded slowly. I've rewritten the speech, he said. Because yesterday, in that diner, something changed. Your mother changed my life years ago. And now you reminded me of that, of why we build, why we lead, why we care. I want to tell the world that story. Elena stared at him, eyes wide. But why me? Why not just talk about her? He smiled. Because you're living proof of her impact. And people need to see what strength looks like when it grows in the shadows. They need to see resilience. Hope, kindness passed down. Elena's hands trembled. What do you want me to do? Just be there, he said. Sit in the front row. And listen. The next day, Elena wore the only formal dress she owned. A navy blue knee-length piece with simple silver earrings. It had been her mother's. She took the train alone this time, nervous energy bubbling inside her. She arrived early and was led to the front row of the grand auditorium. Cameras flashed. Journalists murmured. Tech leaders filled the seats, their eyes on their phones and their minds on the future. And then the lights. And Sundar stepped onto the stage. He began, as expected, welcoming the audience, thanking the organizers, speaking about innovation, the digital age, and the future of artificial intelligence. But then he paused. Before I continue, he said, his voice steady, I want to tell you a story. The room went quiet. Many years ago, when I was still in college, I met someone who changed my life. not a professor, not a billionaire, a young woman working at a tiny clinic in Chennai. She saw through my silence, past my exhaustion. She gave me medicine. Yes, but more than that, she gave me belief. She told me I mattered. And when I felt like giving up, her words kept me going. He stepped forward. She gave me a photo that day. I've carried it in my wallet ever since. And yesterday, I met her daughter. A waitress, a guardian, a fighter. And she reminded me that the most powerful changes often start with one small act of kindness. Gasps rippled through the audience. She's here today, Sundar continued, eyes locked with Elena's. And she doesn't know it yet, but her life is about to change. The room burst into applause. Elena froze, her cheeks flushed. Her throat tightened. She felt everyone turning to look at her, but all she could see was Sundar's eyes steady, sincere, and full of something she hadn't seen in years. Belonging. After the event, Sundar met her backstage. Are you okay? He asked gently. She nodded, her voice shaking. You said my life is about to change. What did you mean? He handed her a folder. Inside was a letter. It had the Google logo. It was addressed to Elena, and it was an offer. A scholarship. A full ride to any university of her choice. A job waiting for her when she graduated, and more. Support for Rafi's education. Counseling services. A moving allowance. She looked up at Sundar, unable to speak. He stepped closer. Your mother believed in me when no one else did. Now it's my turn. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for remembering her. Sundar placed a hand on her shoulder. Kindness never dies, Elena. It echoes, and sometimes it finds its way back to us. But what neither of them knew was that this story was far from over, because a woman in the crowd had been watching, and what she held in her hands would uncover a secret that had been buried for decades. The letter from the shadowed crowd had dispersed. The spotlight had faded. But somewhere deep in the back of that grand auditorium, where shadows stretched long and unnoticed, a woman remained seated. Her name was Meena. She was older, maybe, in her late 50s, with a quiet presence and watchful eyes. She wore a simple shawl draped over her shoulders and a notebook clutched tightly in her lap. No one had noticed her when she arrived. No one noticed her when she stayed behind. Meena hadn't come for the tech announcements or the promises of digital futures. She hadn't come to network or to pitch a startup idea. She had come for one reason only, to hear Sundar speak. Because she had been waiting for this moment for almost 30 years. And when she heard the name Anaya, her breath caught when Sundar told the story of the young woman who worked at the clinic in Chennai. Meena's heart cracked open like a long-forgotten door. The memories came rushing in warm nights filled with laughter, shared secrets under mango trees, dreams whispered into the wind. Anaya, that they had been best friends once. Inseparable. And then everything changed after the speech ended and the room began to empty. Meena slowly stood. She reached into her bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope, its edges frayed, the handwriting faded but still legible. It was a letter, one she had never delivered, one written decades ago, from Anaya, addressed to someone no one else had ever known existed. Meena stepped outside the auditorium, her breath shallow, the letter trembling in her hands. Across the lobby, she saw Elena speaking to Sundar, still surrounded by flashing cameras and excited voices. Meena didn't approach them. Not yet. Instead, she slipped out through a side door and sat on a bench beneath a jacaranda tree. She stared at the letter for a long time. Meanwhile, inside the building, Elena was still overwhelmed. The scholarship, the speech, the eyes of the world suddenly on her. It felt unreal, like she had stepped into a movie without a script. Sundar had stayed by her side, calm and supportive, answering every question, guiding her gently through the wave of attention. He had offered to have her driven home, but she had declined. I need to walk, she said softly. Call me if you need anything. He replied. Elena left the building with her purse pressed tightly against her side, the folder clutched under her arm. The city felt different now, louder, brighter. She didn't know if it was the attention or the weight of what had just happened. She turned a corner and found herself in a quiet street, away from the noise. She sat on a low stone wall to catch her breath, and that's when Mina approached. "Excuse me," the older woman said gently, her voice soft like a breeze through dry leaves. "Are you Elena?" Elena looked up, startled. "Yes," she said cautiously. "I was at the talk," Mina continued. I knew your mother." Elena's heart skipped. Her eyes narrowed with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "You knew her?" Mina nodded. "We grew up together, in the same village. She was my best friend." Before she left, Elena stood slowly. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Mina opened her bag and carefully pulled out an old photograph. It showed two teenage girls standing side by side, laughing, arms around each other. One of them was clearly Anaya, Elena's mother. The other was Mina, younger and brighter. The unmistakable Elena gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "That's her." "Yes," Mina whispered. "And I have something she wrote for you." She handed Elena the envelope. Elena's hands trembled. She looked down at the faded ink. Her name, written in her mother's careful script. "I was supposed to give it to you after her passing," Mina explained. "But things got complicated. I left the country for many years. I didn't even know where you were. I only recognized you yesterday when Sundar said your mother's name. When I saw your face, it's her face, Elena. You have her eyes." Elena didn't speak. Her breath was shallow as she slowly opened the envelope. The letter inside was written in Tamil. The handwriting was delicate but rushed, as if Anaya had poured her thoughts out in a flood. "Do you want me to translate it for you?" Mina offered. Elena nodded. They sat together on the bench beneath the tree, and Mina began to read aloud, translating line by line. "My sweet Elena, if you are reading this, then it means I am no longer by your side. I hope you have grown up brave and strong. I know I wasn't able to give you much, but I gave you everything I had. And there's something I need to tell. Something you have a right to know." Elena's heart began to race. "Years ago, before I came to this country, I fell in love. His name was Rahul. He was kind, brilliant, full of dreams. We were inseparable, but fate was cruel. My family disapproved of him, and one day, he left without saying goodbye. I never heard from him again. I found out months later that I was pregnant." Elena froze. "That child was not your brother. It was you." She clutched the edge of the bench, her mind spinning. "I never told you the truth. I never told anyone. I raised you alone, and later your brother too. But I always wondered, what became of Rahul? Where did he go? Did he ever think of me? Of you? Sometimes I would look at you and see his smile, his strength, and it comforted me." Tears poured down Elena's cheeks. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. But if this letter finds you and you are old enough to understand, please know your father wasn't a bad man. He was scared, young, and maybe one day, if the world is kind, you will find him, or maybe he will find you." Mina stopped reading. The letter ended there. Silence settled between them. The sounds of the city felt distant, as if muffled by the weight of what had just been uncovered. Elena sat frozen, the letter clenched in her hands. I don't understand," she whispered. "My father, he left when Rafi was little. He never talked about before. He wasn't the man she described." Mina reached into her notebook and pulled out another photo. "This," she said, "is Rahul." Elena looked down. And her breath left her in one violent rush. It was Sundar. Younger, clean-shaven, standing in front of the same clinic Sundar had spoken of. Elena looked up at Mina, stunned. This can't be real." Mina nodded slowly. "I thought I was wrong. But when he showed the photo of your mother on stage, I knew. She never told him. He never knew you existed." Elena's hands went cold. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "You're telling me," she said slowly, her voice cracking, "that Sundar Pichai is my father?" Mina placed a trembling hand on Elena's. Yes, but neither of them saw the man standing a few feet away. It was Sundar, and he had heard everything. Asterisk. The moment of truth, wind stirred gently as Sundar stood just out of sight. Hidden behind the trunk of a jacaranda tree, the lavender petals swirling softly around. His polished shoes. His breath had gone shallow the moment he recognized Mina's voice. He hadn't seen her in decades, but her tone still carried the same warmth, the same trembling quietness. It transported him back to India, to the village, the temple paths. The nights filled with stars and impossible dreams, but nothing could have prepared him for the words that followed. His heart had clenched when he heard Anaya's name. It shattered when he heard Elena's, and now, as he stood rooted to the spot, his entire world seemed to collapse and rebuild itself within a single breath. For the first time in years, Sundar was speechless, not in a boardroom, not on a stage, but in his heart. This wasn't business. This was blood. This was history. And it had found him in the most unexpected way. His feet moved on their own, drawn toward the bench like a tide toward the shore. Elena saw him first. She looked up with wide eyes, her face pale and streaked with silent tears. Her fingers clutched the letter so tightly it was crumpled in the middle. Mina turned next, gasping softly as she rose to her feet. But Sundar didn't speak. He simply looked at Elena, not the young waitress from a diner, not the girl who reminded him of someone long gone, but the daughter he never knew existed. He stood before her with a storm of oceans warring inside him. Dark grief, disbelief, regret. Is it true? His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. What I just heard. Is it true? Mina nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with sorrow. Yes, Elena didn't move. She couldn't. Her legs felt numb, her thoughts tangled. All her life, she had carried questions about her father, why he left, who he had been, what he had felt. And now, standing before her, was a man who had unknowingly carried those same questions. Only they had been hidden beneath success, power, and years of silence. You're my father? She whispered, still unable to believe the sound of her own voice. Sundar stepped closer, his expression hollowed by disbelief. I didn't know. Anaya. She never told me. His voice trembled. She must have had her reasons, Mina said, gently. She loved you, but your world, her world, they were very different back then. Sundar sank slowly onto the bench beside Elena, his hand shaking slightly as he looked down at the letter she held. May I? He asked. Elena handed it to him without a word. He read it silently, his eyes moving line by line, absorbing each word as if it were a lifeline thrown across decades of darkness. When he reached the end, his eyes filled with tears. I remember her, he whispered, the words almost inaudible, so vividly. I thought she was just a moment in time, but she was everything. He looked up at Elena, his voice raw, and so are you. She blinked, stunned that a silence fell between them, heavy and sacred. I don't know what to say, she finally murmured. You don't have to say anything, Sundar replied. I know this is too much, too fast. I've had hours to process what you just learned in minutes, but Elena, please know this. If I had known, if I had even suspected. His voice cracked. I would have looked for you. I would have never stopped. Elena looked away, her jaw tight. I don't know what to feel. For so long I blamed the man who left. I hated him. But now, it wasn't you. It wasn't even him. It was no one. It was time, Mina said softly. And sometimes, time can be cruel. A long pause followed. Then Sundar reached into his wallet, pulled out the photo of Anaya, and placed it on the bench between them. She saved me, he said again, not just with words. She made me want to be someone good, someone kind. I didn't know she gave me a daughter. Elena finally turned to him. You gave her that photo, she said, pointing to the image. She gave you hope. And now you've given it back to me. They sat in silence again, not as strangers this time, but as two pieces of the same story finally finding each other. Later that evening, Elena returned home in a daze. She didn't take a car this time. She walked. Each step felt heavy with meaning. When she reached her apartment, she stood outside the door for a full minute before finally opening it. Rafi was sitting at the table. His math homework spread out like a battlefield. He looked up and smiled. You're back. How was it? Did you meet any famous people again? Elena forced a smile, but something in her eyes gave her away. Sit down, she said gently. I need to tell you something. And for the next hour, she told him everything. About the diner, about Sundar, about the photo, about the letter, about who their father really was. Rafi didn't say much at first. His jaw hung open, his eyes wide, absorbing every detail. But when she finished, he whispered something that caught her by surprise. Does that mean we're not alone anymore? She felt the tears before she realized they were coming. She hugged him tightly, her voice shaking. No, she whispered. We're not. 2 days later, Sundar called. He wanted to meet again, somewhere private, away from reporters, away from cameras. Elena agreed. This time, they met at a quiet park where children played in the distance and the air smelled of fresh grass. Rafi came too, nervous and idgety. Sundar arrived with no security. No staff. Just himself and a small brown bag. I brought something, he said, offering it to Rafi. Inside was a Lego robotics kit. Rafi, single quotes, SIs lit up. Double quotes, I heard you're into tech, Sundar said. Smiling. Rafi nodded slowly. His voice shy. I want to build machines that help people. Sundar kneeled beside him. That's exactly what we try to do at Google. They talked for hours. About science. About space. About Anaya. About everything in between. And for the first time, Elena saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Rafi laughing. Not his regular giggles. Not the kind that came from silly cartoons or jokes, but the deep, open laughter of someone who finally felt seen. Before they left. Sundar looked at Elena. I know I can't change the past, he said quietly, but I want to be part of your future, if you'll let me. Elena didn't answer right away. She watched Rafi run ahead, his new kit tucked under his arm like treasure. Then she looked back at the man who had unknowingly carried her photo in his wallet for 25 years. You already are, she said softly, but even as hope began to rebuild the bridge between them, neither of them noticed the stranger across the street. A man in a dark coat. Watching. His face hidden beneath a hat. He had a photo in his pocket, too, but his reasons for finding Sundar and Elena were nothing like Mina's. He wasn't holding a letter. He was holding a secret, and soon, everything they had just found would be threatened again. Asterisk the secret in the shadows. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden haze across the park as Elena and Sundar watched Rafi climb a jungle gym, his laughter drifting through. The air like music, the grass swayed in the breeze, and for the first time in years, Elena felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest piece. It wasn't just the discovery of her father, or the promise of a better future, or even the scholarship offer that had stunned the world. It was the sense that maybe, just maybe, the universe hadn't forgotten her after all. But peace, like glass, is fragile, and someone was about to shatter it. Across the street, the man in the dark coat leaned against a lamppost, watching the scene unfold with cold calculation. His name was Vivek. No one knew him. No one had invited him. But he had known about Elena long before Sundar had. He had known about her mother. And more importantly, he had known the secret that Anaya had taken to her grave. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo. It was old, grainy. In the picture. A younger Anaya stood beside two men. One of them was Sundar, unmistakably youthful and bright-eyed. The other was Vivek himself. The past was no longer past. It was walking straight into the present. 2 days later, Sundar invited Elena and Rafi to his private residence for dinner. It wasn't a mansion or a castle like people imagine. It was warm, modest, filled with books and photos and a soft, unspoken humility. Sundar cooked himself something light, vegetarian, comforting. They laughed. They told stories. Rafi showed off a robot prototype he'd been building from the kit. Elena watched them with quiet awe, the threads of her life slowly weaving into something whole. After dinner, while Rafi played in the living room, Sundar pulled Elena aside to the study. I wanted to give you something, he said. Opening a drawer, he handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a pendant, simple, elegant, with the letter E engraved in delicate cursive. I had this made for you, he said. Not to replace anything. Not to erase what came before. Just to mark this moment. Elena felt the pendant's weight in her hand. She couldn't speak. Only tears formed, quiet and slow. I don't know how to be a father, Sundar continued, but I want to try. I want to show up. To be present, not just for you, but for Rafi too. Elena nodded slowly, the words settling into her heart. Like seeds in rich soil. Thank you. She whispered. A knock interrupted the moment, not from inside the house, from the front door. Sundar frowned, puzzled. It was late, and he hadn't been expecting anyone. He walked to the door and opened it slowly. Vivek stood there. Older now. Sharper. His presence was cold, like a sudden drop in temperature. Sundar, he said, nodding. It's been a long time. Sundar blinked, stunned. Vivek? What you doing here? I came for the truth, Vivek said, stepping inside uninvited. And maybe to warn you. Elena walked into the hallway just as Sundar closed the door behind the unexpected guest. She immediately sensed the tension in the air. Elena, Sundar said, this is Vivek. We knew each other a long time ago. Vivek's eyes scanned her face carefully. Yes, I know who she is. Elena stepped back slightly, uneasy. I was there, Vivek continued, when you and Anaya first met. I was also there when she cried for weeks after you left. She never told you what happened. Before she gave you that photo, did she? Sundar stiffened. I didn't leave by choice, Vivek. My family forced me to move to the US for school. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Vivek's jaw tightened. And yet you never wrote back, never called. Because I never got her letters, Sundar snapped. I thought she had moved on. She hadn't, Vivek said darkly. She was pregnant. Sundar's face went pale. I know, he said softly. I know now. But Vivek wasn't finished. He reached into his coat and pulled out a stack of letters, old, folded, never opened. I was the one who kept them from you, he admitted, his voice hollow. I was in love with her. And I thought, if I erased you, maybe she would love me instead. Elena gasped, her stomach tightening. You, Sundar said, stepping forward, his voice sharp. You stole her letters? Vivek nodded. And I've lived with the guilt ever since. Silence. Pure, burning silence. Elena stepped forward now, her voice steady but trembling. So you knew about me all along? Vivek met her eyes. Yes. And I told myself it wasn't my place. That she didn't want him to know. But the truth is, I was scared. I was jealous. And I hurt all of you because of it. He looked at Sundar now, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I can't take it back. But you needed to know. Sundar turned away, his fists clenched. He cost me 25 years, he whispered. No, Vivek said. And it's haunted me every day. He turned to Elena and handed her the stack of unopened letters. These were meant for him, he said. But maybe they belong to you now. And then he walked out, disappearing into the night like a ghost with unfinished business. The living room was quiet again. Elena sat with the letters spread out across the floor. Each one like a puzzle piece of a story she never got to hear. She opened one. My Sundar, today our daughter took her first step. Her fingers trembled. She opened another. I miss you. I keep wondering if you'll ever see her smile. Each word was a fragment of love suspended in time. Each line a tear that had never been cried until now. The days that followed moved slowly. Sundar took time off work. He spent every day with Elena and Rafi. They went to the beach. They cooked together. They laughed, even as they cried. They read every letter together, one by one. And by the end, they weren't just catching up on a lost past. They were writing a new one. Weeks later, Sundar stood in front of a much smaller audience, a group of young girls from underprivileged backgrounds. He spoke not about search engines or algorithms, but about love, about resilience, about second chances.